4 train horror stories that will leave you too scared to ride again. Tell late night story. Welcome to DTC, the place of the brave, where we dive into the darkest corners of the unknown and uncover stories that will send shivers down your spine. Tonight, we're boarding a journey into terror. Stories set on trains, where the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks hides something far more sinister. Trains have always been a symbol of movement and progress, but what happens when they become a vessel for the unexplainable? When the familiar becomes unfamiliar and the journey takes a turn into the horrifying. From ghostly passengers to unexplained disappearances, these 4 train horror stories will make you think twice before stepping onto another train. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself. Because by the end of this video, you might just be too scared to ride again. Let's begin. Story 1. He, woman in the hallway. I had been planning this trip for years, a solo journey across Europe, ticking off places from my bucket list, immersing myself in different cultures, living the adventure I had always dreamed of. The overnight train from Vienna to Budapest was supposed to be just another step in my journey, just another night on the rails. But I would soon realize that some things cannot be explained by logic. I found my private cabin, tossed my backpack onto the small bed, and stretched. The rhythmic clatter of the train rolling over the tracks had always been oddly comforting to me, a lullaby of sorts. It reminded me of the nights when I was a child, falling asleep in the back seat of my parents' car during long road trips, the distant hum of the tires against the pavement lulling me into dreams. But tonight, something felt different. The air inside my cabin was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Maybe it was just exhaustion playing tricks on me. As I pulled off my jacket, I noticed a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye, just outside my cabin window. It wasn't just a simple shift, but a slow, deliberate glide, like someone drifting rather than walking. The figure seemed to pause for a moment as if aware I had seen it, before subtly tilting its head, peering through the curtain's gap with an unsettling stillness. Through the small gap in the curtain, I saw her. An older woman stood just outside the next sleeping car, perfectly still, staring directly at me. Not just looking, but staring, like she could see through me, past me, into something beyond. A shiver ran down my spine. I quickly shut the curtain, telling myself it was nothing, just a lost passenger. Maybe she was confused, or maybe I was just overthinking things. Still, the image of her gaunt face lingered in my mind. The train lurched forward, its low hum filling the space around me. I forced myself onto the bed, pulling the thin blanket over my body, willing sleep to take over. But no matter how I turned, how I tried to push away the unease, I couldn't fully drift off. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up with an overwhelming sense of dread. My throat was dry, my body coated in a thin layer of sweat. I needed water and the bathroom. Reluctantly, I sat up and cracked the door open. The hallway was eerily silent. The dim, flickering lights cast long, distorted shadows against the walls. Something about it felt wrong. The air smelled stale, tinged with something old, something decayed. As I stepped out, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The kind of cold that seeped into your bones, that no amount of warmth could shake off. And then I saw her again, closer this time. She stood in the hallway just a few steps ahead of me, her head slightly bowed, her long, brittle fingers hanging limply by her sides. The dim light revealed more details now. Her clothes were outdated, tattered at the edges as if worn for decades. Her skin was sallow, almost waxy. And her mouth was moving, silently forming words that I couldn't hear. I stopped in my tracks, my breath hitching, my chest tightening as if unseen fingers were squeezing the air from my lungs. A cold sweat prickled at the back of my neck, and my knees locked, refusing to move. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the faint hum of the train as an overwhelming sense of dread rooted me to the spot. I had to pass her to get to the bathroom. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, to lock myself in my cabin, but my body wouldn't move. As I forced myself forward, holding my breath, she twitched. Just a small, unnatural jerk of her head, as if she was aware of my presence but refused to acknowledge it. The moment I stepped past her, a rancid, mothball-like scent hit me so hard I gagged. I didn't run. I couldn't, but I moved as fast as I could, slamming the bathroom door behind me. My hands trembled as I gripped the sink. My face was pale, my breathing ragged. Minutes passed. I needed to go back, to my cabin, to safety. Slowly, I cracked the door open, peering into the hallway. She was gone. Relief flooded me as I rushed back to my cabin, locking the door behind me. I slid under the blanket, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe she was just an old woman who had lost her way. Maybe I was half asleep, hallucinating. Maybe... Deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. Morning came, but the unease didn't leave me. I needed answers. As the train pulled into Budapest, I approached one of the attendants, casually asking about the old woman, expecting some mundane explanation, expecting them to tell me she was just another passenger. Instead, the color drained from his face. "What woman?" he asked. "The woman in the hallway," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "She was standing outside my cabin. I saw her twice." The attendant swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the empty sleeping car next to mine. "That cabin has been unoccupied the entire trip." A chill ran down my spine. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, that couldn't be right. I had seen her. She had been there. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I never saw her again. Never dared to take that train route again. But even now, years later, when I'm alone at night, I sometimes feel a presence just beyond my vision. A flicker of movement in the dark, a whisper too faint to understand, as if she never truly left. But sometimes in the dead of night, when I close my eyes, I still see her, standing there, waiting. What do you think she wanted? Was she searching for someone? Or something? Have you ever seen something that couldn't be explained? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or maybe some things are better left unsaid. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2. The Watcher in the Dark. Have you ever had the feeling that someone was watching you, but when you turned around, there was no one there? I used to think it was just my imagination, a fleeting sensation, a trick of the mind. But after that night, I knew better. That evening, I worked late. Too late. The office was a ghost town, desks abandoned, computers humming quietly, their glow casting eerie reflections on the windows. The only sound was the dull buzz of the air conditioning and the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard. I had finished my report, even though I knew no one would read it before Monday. Outside, the city felt deserted. The streetlights flickered weakly, struggling against the encroaching darkness. The air smelled damp, thick with the scent of rain that had yet to fall. I descended the stairs into the subway. Something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The station was too quiet. There was no one at the turnstiles, no distant chatter, no muffled sounds of trains approaching, only the faint echo of my footsteps bouncing off the tiled walls. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. As I reached the platform, the last train screeched to a halt. Its door slid open with a sluggish hiss. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The car was nearly empty. A man was slumped over, asleep, his head bobbing slightly with the motion of the train. An elderly woman clutched her purse tightly on her lap, staring blankly at the floor. And at the far end of the car sat him. A man in a long black coat, hunched slightly forward, his hands folded between his knees. He didn't move, didn't look up. I sat near the window, resting my head against the cold glass. My reflection stared back at me, pale and tired. But something was wrong. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. There was someone sitting directly behind me, a dark shape, motionless. Close enough that, had they been real, I would have felt their breath on my neck. I whipped around. Nothing. No one was there. I swallowed hard and turned back to my phone, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling curling in my stomach. The train rumbled forward, stopping at the next station. The elderly woman left. The sleeping man stirred, but didn't wake. And then, when I glanced toward the far end of the car, the man in the black coat had moved. Not much, just a few seats closer, but he hadn't made a sound. My fingers tightened around my phone. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he had shifted forward when I wasn't looking. But then, at the next stop, he moved again, one seat closer. I forced myself to keep looking at my screen. Another stop, another seat closer. The air felt heavier. I could sense him watching me. By the time we reached the second to last stop, the train had emptied. Just me and him. I didn't dare look up, but I could feel him. His presence was suffocating. The train car felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. The train slowed. The doors opened. I should have run, but I didn't. Some primal fear, kept me rooted in place. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw movement. He was sitting right next to me. I stopped breathing. A cold, stale scent filled my nostrils. Damp fabric, something rotting underneath. His head turned toward me in slow, mechanical movements. Then a whisper, so close I could feel his breath against my skin. "You're late." My stomach twisted. I didn't think. I just acted. I bolted out of my seat. The train doors were about to close, but I squeezed through at the last second, stumbling onto the platform. I ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. I could hear him behind me, not running, not walking, just following. I reached the exit, lungs burning, and when I turned back, he was gone. The platform was empty. The train had already disappeared down the tunnel. I bent over, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were shaking, my head spun. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Then I felt it. My coat was wet, not with sweat, not with rain, but with something thick and cold and wrong. I raised a trembling hand and touched my shoulder. My fingers came away slick with a dark, oily substance. A drop ran down my wrist, trailing over my veins, like something alive. I turned my phone's flashlight on, my heart hammering in my chest. There was something written on my sleeve. Not ink, not paint, something deeper. Something burned into the fabric. 2 words. "Not yet." Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I hesitated, opened it. It contained only 3 words. "See you soon." What would you do if you received that message? Would you go home, call someone, or would you never take the subway again? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Before it's too late, do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, the Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 3. The Abandoned Train Yard. It was the summer of 2018, the kind of summer where the heat sticks to your skin and the air feels heavy with something unseen. My best friend Lucas and I had always been fascinated by abandoned places. The thrill of stepping into a forgotten world, untouched for years, sent shivers down my spine in the best way. That night, we found ourselves creeping past a rusted chain-link fence, slipping into the shadows of an old train yard on the outskirts of Detroit. The whole place smelled like damp metal and decay, as if time had rotted the very air itself. The further we ventured in, the quieter everything became. The rhythmic hum of the city faded into an unnatural silence, thick and heavy, pressing against my ears like cotton. The faint smell of rust and oil hung in the air, mixing with the damp, earthy scent of decaying wood. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the gravel, flickering under the dim glow of a distant street lamp. It was as if the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to make the first move. No city sounds, no insects, just an unsettling silence stretching in every direction. That's when we saw it. Tucked away between two skeletal train cars was something different. Unlike the rusted-out shells around it, this one looked untouched by time. Its exterior was eerily pristine, its windows impossibly dark. It stood out in a way that made my stomach tighten. Lucas was the first to step up. "It looks new," he muttered, brushing his fingers against the metal surface. It was cold, unnaturally so, like touching ice in the middle of a humid night. The door wasn't locked. With a slow, grating creak, it slid open, revealing nothing but blackness inside. The second we stepped in, the air changed, heavy, suffocating. My breath hitched as the door behind us let out a metallic groan and slammed shut. Lucas cursed and lunged for the handle. I clicked on my flashlight, the weak beam cutting through the dense dust hanging in the air. The inside of the train was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The seats weren't covered in dust or mold like you'd expect from something abandoned. They looked used, freshly used. But no one had been here for decades, right? Then we saw them. Carvings, deep, jagged etchings running along the walls like desperate claw marks. Some were numbers, some were strange, looping symbols that seemed to twist even in the dim light. Among them, words in a language neither of us recognized, their edges uneven as if carved in frantic urgency. Some symbols resembled eyes, hollow and staring. Others looked like hands reaching out, fingers unnaturally long. My stomach clenched as I traced one with my fingertips. It felt deeper than it should, like the metal itself had been worn away by something more than just human hands. Deep scratches along the walls etched into the metal like claw marks. Numbers, symbols, strange, unreadable text. Dozens of them overlapping each other like someone had been trapped in here, desperately trying to leave a message. My flashlight flickered. Lucas's breath came out shaky. "Dude, what the hell is this?" Before I could answer, a sound, a whisper, low and breathy, curling around my ears like it came from right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the whispering didn't stop. It grew, layer upon layer, voices speaking over each other, murmuring things I couldn't understand. The seats creaked, a slow, deliberate movement in the darkness. The darkness thickened, pressing in around us like a living thing. A flicker of movement caught my eye, a shifting shadow just beyond the reach of my flashlight. The air felt charged, heavy with something unseen. And then I saw it, a figure, or the shadow of one, sitting perfectly still at the far end of the train car, head tilted at an unnatural angle. I could barely make out its shape, but something about it was wrong, distorted as if reality itself was warping around it. Its fingers drummed lazily against the armrest. And then it stood up. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, my throat burned and my hands ached from clawing at the door. My nails scraped against the metal, leaving behind streaks of sweat and desperation. Lucas was beside me, his breath ragged, yanking at the handle with frantic strength. The air around us thickened, pressing against my skin like unseen fingers, and for a terrifying second I swore I felt something brushing against the back of my neck, cold, deliberate. My vision blurred, heart hammering, and just when I thought we'd never escape, the handle gave way with a sickening creak, and we tumbled out into the night. Lucas was beside me, yanking at the handle until, finally, it gave way. We tumbled out, slamming the door behind us, gasping for breath. The train yard was silent again. We ran. We didn't stop until we were back at my house, hearts pounding, sweat drenching our skin. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, too shaken to speak. The air between us was thick with unspoken fears, each of us wondering if what we saw had truly been real. But deep down, we both knew. We hadn't imagined it. That train, those carvings, that thing in the darkness, it had all been real. Days passed, but the unease didn't fade. At night, I found myself staring at my bedroom door, half expecting to hear that same whisper slithering into my room. Every flicker of movement in the corner of my eye sent my heart racing. And then the nightmares started. I dreamt of the train, but this time I was trapped inside. The carvings on the walls shifted and twisted, forming words I still couldn't understand. I would turn to run, but my feet wouldn't move. And then the shadow would appear, closer every time. Lucas stopped answering my texts after a week. When I finally saw him again, he looked different, gaunt, exhausted. He confessed that he too had been dreaming about the train, but worse, he was starting to see things while awake. A figure at the edge of his vision, disappearing the second he turned his head. He swore he heard something moving outside his window at night, tapping, waiting. But the moment we caught our breath, Lucas grabbed his phone. He had to know what we had just walked into. Hours of digging through old archives led us to an article from 1974. A train car, identical to the one we had just escaped, had been decommissioned after a gruesome discovery. A man had been found inside, locked in, his body twisted in ways that didn't make sense. No sign of forced entry, no explanation for how he got there. The article even mentioned the carvings on the walls. I don't go near abandoned places anymore. Lucas won't even talk about that night, but sometimes when I'm alone, I hear it again. That whisper, right at the edge of my hearing, too faint to be real. And when I close my eyes, I still see that figure standing in the dark, watching, waiting. What do you think? Have you ever felt something watching you when you were alone? Maybe a whisper in an empty room, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. Would you have stepped onto that train? Or would you have sensed the warning and turned back before it was too late? Would you have stepped onto that train or turned back before it was too late? Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 4. The Passenger in the Dark. I don't usually take the train at night. In fact, I try to avoid it at all costs. But that night, everything seemed to conspire against me. Work dragged on longer than expected. A difficult client kept complaining. I missed my early train, and when I stepped out of the office, the rain started pouring down heavily. I rummaged through my bag for an umbrella, only to realize I had left it at home. My phone was nearly dead, my stomach was growling, and all I wanted was to get home as soon as possible. But the only train left that night was the one I never wanted to take. The train was nearly empty, just as I had imagined. Only a few scattered figures sitting silently in their seats, lost in their own worlds. I picked a seat near the window, convincing myself that if I just closed my eyes for a little while, everything would be fine. But then I saw him. A man in a black coat sat at the far end of the carriage. At first, I didn't think much of it. He sat there completely still, his eyes wide open, staring straight ahead without blinking. His eyes were hollow, pitch black, like bottomless pits, reflecting the train's flickering lights in a distorted way. For a brief moment, I had the unsettling feeling that his pupils were unnaturally dilating, as if they did not belong to a human being. His lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Only a cold shiver ran down my spine. Something felt wrong. A normal person wouldn't sit so still like that. I turned away, trying not to dwell on it. But when the train stopped at the next station, I felt something change. When I glanced back, he had moved. Not much, just one row closer. A small shift, but enough to unsettle me. Maybe he just wanted a different seat, but the way he moved, so silently, so unnaturally, made it hard for me to breathe. I tried to calm myself, but at the next stop he moved even closer. This time he was only a few seats away. No sound, no indication, he was just suddenly there. I started to feel real fear. He wasn't looking at anyone else, only at me. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As the train neared the last stop, he shifted to the seat directly in front of me. I heard a faint noise, almost a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound wasn't human. It was distorted, unnatural, as if he were repeating words that didn't belong to this world. My heart pounded, my entire body froze. I couldn't sit there for another second. The moment the train stopped, I bolted from my seat and ran outside. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare see if he was following me. But I could feel it, the sound of footsteps behind me, echoing with an eerie rhythm on the train floor. The air around me was ice cold, like an unseen hand was stretching out, holding me in fear. My body was rigid, sweat trickling down my spine, each breath growing heavier. I ran faster, but the sensation remained, that ominous shadow clinging to my every step. When I reached my door, I locked it behind me, panting, trying to shake off the terror. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The feeling of being watched lingered, seeping into my thoughts. The next morning, when I stepped outside to pick up my newspaper, something was on my doorstep. A train ticket, the route, the time, the carriage number, all matched exactly with the train I had taken the previous night. But the most terrifying part? The ticket wasn't mine. It was crumpled, as if someone had been gripping it tightly for a long time. The edges were torn, but the printed words were still disturbingly clear. And what sent a chill through my veins, the ink looked as if it hadn't fully dried, as if it had just been printed the moment before I opened my door. My name was on it, but I had never bought it. I didn't know who had left it there or how they knew where I lived. I don't take the train anymore, but every night I still feel someone standing outside my window, staring at me from the darkness. Each night, before I sleep, I pull the curtains shut. But by morning, they are always slightly open, as if someone had stood there watching. I check my door lock one more time, my hand trembling as I touch the doorknob. I know I locked it, but there's always that feeling that at any moment it could be turned from the other side. So tell me, have you ever encountered a stranger on a train that made you feel uneasy? Would you dare take the last train of the night again? As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here, it only gets worse. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave now, and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of DTC, the place of the brave are always waiting, and they never rest. Good luck sleeping tonight.